The Absence Analytics report back on Business Objects looks at 13 months worth of absence details for a scheme or schemes of your choice. So when you refresh this report, it'll ask you for the date range that you want to put in, and then which of your absence schemes you wish to look at. Most people use it to look at their OSP sickness schemes. All of that 13 months worth of data is then split onto a series of different tabs. The different lenses of these mean that if you are looking for a specific piece of information, that should dictate which of these tabs you go to. Once you're on those tabs, there are a series of filters called input controls up at the top of the screen so that we can narrow it down by a department, for example, whether we want to look at the days lost, the number of absence instances, whether it's short-term absences, long-term absences, and so on. So an awful lot to play around within here. But the idea is that using this pack should hopefully reduce the amount of time you spend building bespoke reports for absence. The answer to your absence queries should be in here somewhere. Just navigate to the right tab, apply those filters, and then you can use those answers or export those details from the report if you need to. So looking at what's available in here, the first half a dozen or so tabs are saying absence analysis by something. That is looking at the latest completed month of details. So who has been off sick and the percentage of time lost split by structure or some position related details like category, basis and type. Under there, we have some trend analyses. So looking at absence over the course of the whole year, again, split by structure, category, basis, type. Underneath there, we get it split by some personal characteristics. So into age bands, ethnicity, disability, religion, salary, job title, length of service, to see if there's any correlation between the jobs that people do and who has been off sick. The start day and single day analysis looks at which day of the week people have been off sick. And then some other summarized details like Bradford factor, the employee summary, so a league table of absence. And then finally, the absence instance list there, that's the data set that the whole report uses. So you can see every instance of absence that somebody has had and the details to back them up. If we have a look at the absence analysis by structure, up at the top we can see the head count for the month, so how many people worked for us during November. Even if they've left, they were still here for part of November, so they will be included in that total. Based on the schemes we selected when we refreshed the report, how many instances of sickness have we had? And then the number of days lost in total. This comes direct from the iTrent absence calculation. Say when that runs, looks up every employee's working pattern to say they've been off Monday to Friday, but they only work Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. That's 3 days lost, for example. The short-term and long-term split there, that can be changed within the report to fit your local policy. So the number of calendar days at which it becomes a long-term absence. Based on the number of days lost and the number of people, we can say how many days have we lost per person. And then over here, there's an assumed number of available days in the month. So stripping off weekends, just looking at Mondays to Fridays, and then multiplied by each employee's FTE. So if there are 22 days available in the month, and somebody is 0.5 FTE, that would come down to 11 days for that person. Adds up all of the available days per person and says we've lost this many days for this many days total, so an approximate percentage of time lost. And then finally, the days lost working costs. For each person who's been off sick, it references their rate of pay or scale point value and prorates it down to a daily amount. So if you get £100 a day and you're off for 3 days, that's £300 a day. Underneath the summary, we can break that down departmentally. So looking at org level 3, we can see all of those KPIs again, saying how many people, how many instances of sickness, and how many days lost. And we can drill down on these details. So if I click on the department, for example, it filters the whole page based on the department that I've clicked on. So up at the top, this is just for human resources now. And underneath, it goes down to the level of structure below HR. I can keep drilling down on these details. So the hierarchy goes from level 3 to level 4 to level 5, then to reporting units, then to line manager, and finally to the employees themselves. So I can see from top to bottom all of the necessary statistics for that month, down to see the employees themselves. So here we have Billy's team, for example, 3 people in Billy's team, 1 of whom has been off absent. If I click on there, I can see the people who worked for Billy in that month, and 1 of whom has been off sick. To remove any of those, I click on that arrow to go back up, and it removes those filters one by one until I get back up to the top level. If I look up at the top, I have a series of input controls here. These are all the different filters that I can apply on each of the tabs that we're going to look at. For this tab in particular, if I click on the select view, it defaults to the current month. That's the latest completed month of data. But I can look at, say, the year-to-date summary or a financial year-to-date summary. I can compare this month with the previous month, or this month with the same month last year. So in this case, November versus last November, to see any changes year on year. We can see those same details, not just by structure, but by position details, category basis, type, job family. And up at the top, we get the same summary details because it's the same company and it's the same month, so they would be the same. Underneath, what changes instead of structure, we're now looking at a split for our full-time and part-time employees. But again, I can use these to say, I only want to have a look at that just for HR. Click on OK, and now I can see the split just for HR and the HR basis of 21 full-time employees versus 2 part-time employees and who's been off and so on. Looking at the trend analysis, first thing I can do is change the measure control to say, do you want days lost, or do you want to look at the instances of sickness, short-term and long-term instances? Again, as I said, it was configurable to your local number of calendar days that dictates whether it's short-term or long-term. Or the percentage days lost of available time, really useful for comparing different departments, because although we can have a look at the days lost here and say the personnel and training have lost way more days than anybody else, for all we know, the headcount in personnel could be far higher than any other department. So you would expect them to lose more days. Whereas if we change that to look at the percentage days lost of available time, that's bringing in the headcount into the calculation. So we can then see who is losing a disproportionate amount of time. We can see here that's come down, leisure centre up to 34%. So they're losing more of their available hours than everybody else. We can then use the other tabs to start having a look at why. Who's been off? Why have they been off? If I go back to the days lost, we can see for every department the number of days lost per month. And if I scroll down, that's put graphically here, so I can see at a glance over the course of the year, when have we lost the most amount of time to absence, and for which departments as well. So each of these represents a different department, and I can hover over them to see who's who. We can apply all of those filters as before up at the top to narrow down as necessary. And because I'm looking at the structure tab, I can still drill down on this data and say, just show me the details for HR. And this is now the trend just for HR. And up above, that's gone down to the level below, so I can see for each department within HR, when have they lost their time? If I look at the HR admin team, what does the annual trend look like for them? And I can keep drilling down as before until we get down to line manager and then employees, and see the records for individuals and see when in the year have they been off sick. If we have a look at the split by age band, running down the left, this is using their date of birth and iTrend to put them into a 5-year age bracket. And we can see this is where we're losing the days overall and the percentage of the total that makes up. For each of those, we can see graphically for the company as a whole, and then a split by gender. So we can see, does that ring true for our male and female employees? By changing the measure control, it defaults to days lost, but I can have a look instead at the instances of sickness, long-term, short-term, or the percentage of time lost of their available time for each age category. And the same applies for ethnicity, disability, salary. So Any of those will be reliant on the details we have in iTrend, and in terms of any correlation for it, there may be no correlation whatsoever between the ethnicity of your employee and their time off sick, for example. But when it comes to things like position analysis, could be that the jobs people do lend themselves to people being off sick for specific reasons. So it's worth having a look. When we get down to the reason analysis, so why have people been off sick? We can see all the reasons people have given for being off down the left, the number of days we've lost, and then they get populated into this tag cloud. So the more days lost in this case, the bigger the word. That defaults to the current month, but we can change that to look at different time frames and see how has that changed over the last 6 months, for example. So 3 months ago, these were the reasons why people tended to be off sick. How has that changed from this month? Or are they the same? Is it the same employees? Again, we can filter by department, by category, basis, type, and so on as required. For our days of the week analysis, this is looking at which days of the week have people been off. So on the left, the start day of the absence running down here, the number of days lost, and the percentage it makes up. So looking at our test data here, overwhelmingly Mondays is when people tended to be off. Does that ring true of our male and female employees? Absolutely yes. But when we look at the single day analysis, this is looking at what day of the week were people off when they were only off for 1 day. So ignoring any long-term absences, just for 1 day illnesses. Looks to me here that it was Mondays in May, but the easiest way to tell is to scroll down and look at the heat map. So the redder it gets, the more it happened. And as we can see, there's a few spots around here where it starts to heat up, but you can see straight away the big heat point is down here. Mondays in May is when most people were off for 24 hours. A couple of summarized details in here if needed. So the Bradford factors in there if you happen to use it. The employee summary is in here. So this is a league table of absence. So in here we can select which measure we want to look at, whether it's the number of instances of sickness or the number of days lost, filter by specific departments if we want to. And then based on what we've selected, we can see all of our employees in descending order. So we can see who is at the top, who's lost the most number of days in this case. They will be at the top. People who've not lost any at all will be down at the bottom. And then lastly, the absence instance list. This is our data set for the whole report. So this will show us every instance of absence there has been in 13 months. And for each one, we'll see the employee, who it is, where they worked, what position they were in, who their line manager was at the time, and then the details relating to the absence. So the day it started, the date it started, the date it ended, the number of days lost, the absence type, and then the absence reason if it's been entered in there. Again, we can filter up top for either specific departments or specific line managers. So we can type in whoever the line manager is that we want to see, and then export those details and send them off. So if we get a request from a line manager saying, I need to know all of the absences for my staff over the course of the year, use this tab, apply the filter for that manager, and then send it to them straight away. Once the pack has been installed on your business objects environment, if you need any help or have any questions, you can get in touch with the MHR service desk and they'll be happy to help.